Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. The $1 million question right now is the Kiteezi landfill. And what does it tell us about the waste management of our country? It's the biggest question. When you hear 2,500 tons of rubbish picked from this country and only about 56% taken to Kiteezi, what does that mean for the different cities that are being developed or the districts that got cities? And also, when you look at the waste management in this country and look at the number of people that lost their lives, the number of families that were affected in this, doesn't this raise red flags as a country to move forward on how we manage waste before it becomes a problem for all of us? 2,000 families have been affected. The number that is being reported is about 24 people have lost their lives. But the people on ground say the number could be slightly higher. If 2,000 people have been affected, how many homes have been sunk? The number keeps rising day in, day out. But who is to answer questions of accountability? Was this negligence, carelessness, or was someone sleeping on the job? At what point does waste management become a blessing and not a curse? And for today, you'll be meeting the panel that will be discussing some of these things. We have a technical bit of the panel, but also we have some of the people that bring perspective on what should be happening. You can be part of the show. Join us on YouTube, drop your comment there, let us know what you think, or go to our X platform, hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines, drop your comment there, or the number 0709 62 90, sorry, 0709 62 25 90. Let us know what you think so that we can be able to have a conversation. But for now, let's meet the panel.
Join us on your favorite weekly program, Behind the Headlines. Meet the panel. Honorable Engineer Hilary Onek, a politician and engineer who has held various positions in government. He is the current Minister of Relief, Disaster Preparedness and Refugees. He is a trained engineer with a degree in civil engineering from the University of Dar es Salaam. Dr. Amanda Ngabirano, a Ugandan urban planner and academic with a passion for sustainable transportation and urban development. She serves as the chairperson of the National Physical Planning Board. She is a lecturer and researcher in the Department of Architecture and Physical Planning at Makerere University. David Luyimbazi. He is a Ugandan urban planner and administrator, currently serving as the Deputy Executive Director of Kampala Capital City Authority, responsible for overseeing the day-to-day operations of the authority. Musa Echweru, a Ugandan politician and former Minister of State for Relief, Disaster Preparedness and Refugees. Echweru has been a member of the Ugandan Parliament since 2001, representing the Amuria district. He is currently the Minister of State for Works. Honorable Echweru has expertise in disaster management, having overseen responses to natural disasters and refugees crisis in Uganda. Our very own Professor Sarah Sali, a Ugandan academic and researcher, currently serving as a professor of social work and dean of the School of Women and Gender Studies at Makerere University. All of this with Timothy Nyangweso.
All on your public broadcaster, UBC, inspiring Uganda.
So Dr. Manda is on the way. She'll be with us briefly. She'll be here in a short while to be a part of the show. But also the Honorable Minister Hilary Onek was not able to make it because of health reasons there. But we have been joined by Jimmy Ogwang, who is the Acting Commissioner in the Department of Disaster and Preparedness Management in there. And we'll be discussing some of those patent issues with him. But before we get into our discussion of waste management, where the problem is, and then finally towards the tail end of the show, we'll be discussing solutions, let's commensurate with someone that passed away this morning, news that came out. He is known as one of the media mouths that came out to speak about truths that people do not want to hear about. The one Joseph Tamale Mirundi passed away and we celebrate his life. So I will give an opportunity to the panelists here to be able to commensurate with the family and friends, especially looking at how the program came out, and proceedings will happen, and Sunday will be burial. So I'll start with our very own professor here, Joseph Tamale Mirundi, passed on, aged 59 there. If anyone has seen him in the media circles, formerly the press secretary to the president, passed away as the senior presidential advisor on media there. Very sad for his passing, but how would you remember him?
Well, good evening, Timothy, and good evening, our viewers. The news of his passing actually came as a shock to some of us because we have seen him for a long time. We didn't expect him to die last night. So in the morning, I initially thought it was a joke, but then it was confirmed that he had passed on. As you have indicated, we shall remember him for speaking the truth as he wanted to speak. And sometimes this truth was presented in a comical way so that even when it was the hard truth, you found a reason to laugh. I know today they have been playing all those videos of how his will was prepared and how people should prepare for his passing. You know, people should drink free beer, the cows should be eaten like this in Kawala, like this in Kawempe, so all of those things. So he made, I think in a way he prepared people for his passing in a very hilarious way. But I think because we were used to him cracking jokes, we never took that seriously. So we are going to miss him as a person who spoke what he actually felt and what he really believed in. So
Thank you very much. Engineer David Luimbazi, how would you commensurate with the late Tamale Mirundi?
Of course, my thoughts are with the family that have lost a dear one. How would I characterize Tamale? I knew him personally. We didn't interact much, but the few times, we are from the same clan, by the way, the Nchima clan. He's a man who had a very brutal and abrasive character, but with humor behind it. And he had no holds barred kind of way, in that he feared nothing. But in an honest, confrontational way. I found him an interesting character to be with, because he would never hide his thoughts behind his words.
Interesting. Jimmy, over to you. How would you commensurate the late?
The late Tamale Mirundi was a very interesting personality to me, and he portrayed courage and boldness in the media, and he would always be vocal and bring out issues that may even surprise many others, and so, but again in a way that is a little bit more interesting. So I was a fan of him, though sometimes I didn't have enough time to listen to what he was speaking, but I enjoyed his communications. Thank you so much.
Finally, the Honorable Minister.
Yes, Tamale called a spade, like my sister, the professors, just recognized. I interacted with him very closely when he worked in the office of the president, and I was a minister of disaster management then. Like, I think Engineer Luimbaz has described him as brutal. Indeed, he was. I remember one time, I think he thought we had not managed Bududa well. So he described me as a disaster myself. And so I was very hurt because I thought I had done so much. So I called him and I said, Tamale, how dare you call me this, and moreover on television? And he said, okay, we can meet tomorrow and you will run me through what you have done and try to see if you can convince me that I will remove you from the list of those who are disasters. And we did that, and then since then we worked together. He would always see me and with a big smile. But for him, he never minced his words. Sometimes people even used to think whether he was NRM, because there are people who think being NRM sometimes means shying away from the truth. For him, he said it the way he saw it. Whether you are NRM opposition and he thought you are not doing something to his satisfaction, he would always remind you in black and white and in capital letters. That's what he did. May his soul rest in peace.
So as the show and as the session, we commiserate with his family and friends, and in this trying time, we pray that the Lord will cover you and give you strength in this trying time. And hopefully we can be able to learn a lesson, a thing or two from what his life was all about there. Well, let's get into our topic of discussion right now. The biggest story over the weekend, getting into the week, was especially the Kiteezi landfill there, which started in 1996, 36 acres we're talking about there, and was a dumping site, later on upgraded in 2001, was supposed to be decommissioned in 2015 because it was supposed to be 15 years at that. Too many reports coming in from Makere, coming in from KCCA then, really recommending that this had become a red flag. But till Saturday, it became a disaster and a tragedy to many families that were around there. Many people have moved on, but as KCCA, that is a flag for all of us to ask ourselves, how are we doing with our waste management as a country, but also as the cities come up, what are we doing about them? So let me start with Engineer. Engineer Luimbazi, I saw quite a number of clips you addressing this issue from whichever side you saw the elephant, but how did we get here?
Where should I begin? I should begin from, many times we want to attribute fault to government, but even us as individuals have individual responsibility. Nobody should have been living within a corridor or a buffer of 500 meters within the land, that mountain of garbage. The planning standards restrict development near such a garbage mountain. However, communities and continue to develop properties near the landfill. You can see some properties about almost 5 meters from the garbage mountain. Now, that aside, of course, we operate in a budget-constrained environment. We don't get all the resources we want. I mean, and it's because government doesn't have, the collection basket is not large enough to meet each and every need. For the last four or five financial years, we've been successively trying to request funding to increase funding so that we can decommission Kiteezi and move to another side. But due to budget constraints, we've not been able to. So we've been trying to buy more land in order to increase the capacity of Kiteezi. And Kiteezi is not only serving Kampala, it is serving Wakiso, it is serving Mukono, Machinde, Sabagabo, and Chira municipalities. All of them, they don't have their waste disposal sites. So they depend on KCCA's site to deposit waste. So the pressure increased. Now with the rains weakened the landfill, and for whatever activity was going on top of the landfill, one of the edges managed to shear away, causing, I mean, when it sheared, the properties were so close to the garbage mountain, and people got buried, unfortunately. So far, the body count is at about 30 people dead, 18 people rescued. So it is a combination of factors of operating under constrained budget and people not respecting planning laws while developing, houses for their existence.
Almost 10 years from the time this was supposed to be decommissioned. I know you needed about 26 billion to be able to decommission this.
That is it, actually.
You needed 190 billion to be able to commission the one that is in Mukono, in Dundu. But I also know that the people in Dundu are suing KCCA. Let me ask, there is a letter, and I know you have come across it.
Yeah.
The letter that was written by the Director of Public Health, Dr. Okello, who you refer to, on the 2nd of July. The details in here talk about the cracks, they talk about the blockage of the drainages, dilapidation of the operation area. It goes on to tell you how this hazard was and what the potential consequences were. Waste slides, litigation, halting of waste dumping operations, emergency of illegal dumping places. This was a notice that was given on the 2nd of July. It talks about some of these things by the 28th of June, almost 2 months, and nothing has been done. Are you saying nothing could be done to avoid this disaster?
The thing is, the budget for this financial year had just been appropriated like a few days before July. That is, remember that is 2nd of July.
Yes.
Okay. We tried going to the Physical Infrastructure Committee, the Parliamentary Affairs Committee of Parliament, arguing for the need for a budget to support Kiteezi in order to try and avert some of the problems that were highlighted in there. On recognition that no budget had been provided, hence the Director of Public Health raised the concern. That concern was raised, and the Executive Director asked him to cost those implications so that she can be able to see whether she can argue for more funding. But we can only get a supplementary in the 3rd quarter. Begin preparing for supplement in the 3rd quarter. Now, we are at the beginning of the 1st quarter. So if we were to avert this disaster, we should have had money in the budget, not at the start of the budgeting period, which is July. So technically, we were like in a confined space, and we had no legroom to secure additional budget to be able to avert this.
Are we still dumping garbage at Kiteezi as we speak?
At the moment, dumping has been suspended because the garbage mountain that is unstable, we cannot load it with additional garbage. What we have an additional 4 acres that's available off-site, off the unstable garbage mountain. Now, what we're doing, we're trying to use the Nkumba or Katabi landfill for about 2 to 3 months as we prepare the 4 acres that are available in Kiteezi. So that we can, because before we exit Kiteezi, we need to stabilize it. We need to bury that landfill. We need to have it as, bury it in a safe, environmental, sustainable way, so that the stench, the flies, the leachate does not continue to harm the community. That's why we cannot just leave Kiteezi, just cut off and run.
Wow. Professor, let me come to you. Hearing what the engineer really has grappling, budget issues, you know, they're grappling with this for the last 4 financial years. We were here, we saw a supplementary towards the end of the last financial year, and we do not want to get into that of the politics there. But as a country, our waste management policy, where are we getting it wrong?
Thank you very much, Timothy. I wouldn't see it as getting it wrong. I think what we are seeing is rapid population growth, and of course we are among the youngest countries, youngest in terms of the population. So you have a very young country, you have limited opportunities up country, so everyone is moving into the cities, and the cities are not ready for the kind of population explosion they are experiencing. So as people move in, as people settle in, they are consuming, and unfortunately, the waste we produce is that kind of waste which cannot easily be disposed of. And we are talking about Kiteezi as a dumping ground, but I also know that other landfills do much more than just dumping in advanced countries. So maybe we don't have the means for that. And so other than just dumping, I think 63% of the waste is largely organic. That is food waste, it is vegetation waste, there's soil waste, there are a few plastics, paper, cloth, and the rest. So we just put it there, and unfortunately our people do not sort garbage. Even in a home, when you sort and the trucks come, they will mix. So when they mix, when you have plastic and it's absorbing water, then it affects the speed at which the other things decompose. So it's not really that getting it wrong. I think the point is the population increase is running faster than the resources. But that having been said, at least Makerere did a lot of work around there from 2012 to 2015. And interestingly, all of the papers you read from Makerere acknowledge KCCA as a partner in that research. Some of that research was about the risk that the landfill posed to the community. Because even by that time, 2015, the cliff, the breakages up, and whatever the technical people call it, were observed. That research was done by Makerere University, and it acknowledges KCCA. Then there were other researches, again done by Makerere, financed by CEDA, which was a government bilateral grant, which actually spoke to how else we could build a solid waste management mechanism. And they acknowledge how the mere dumping, the limited recycling, the lack of capacity to process information was going to be, not information, this waste was going to be a challenge. And of course, they identified the lack of power, the lack of skills, there are so many things, the technology, the economics working against this, the politics working against all these processes. So that is observed as far back as 2012, 2015. And with KCCA as a partner on board. So it's true the budget for this year could have been delayed and the supplementary. But given that KCCA has walked this journey with Makerere from at least 2015, this beginning of 2015, that would have been enough time to collect or to appeal for supplementaries. To know, because KCCA has engineers and they're working together with the Makerere engineers to see that this thing should have been resolved. So I think probably maybe that's where we didn't take things seriously. But so you have a population crisis in a country with limited technological advancement. But then you also have on this side the experts, both in KCCA and Makerere, recognizing that there's a problem. We still wonder why it was not seen as a potential strategy, disaster. Because the scientists themselves had said it was a risk. So why didn't we see it as a potential disaster? But also you read in other news channels that actually even when KCCA and the ED, the previous ED, Jennifer C, tried to enforce what I think the deputy ED is talking about, the buffers and the rest, the politics overrode that because those who represent the people thought that this was not right. So if those stories are true, then we have a whole mix of things which when they converged last weekend, we saw the tragedy that we saw.
And I'm glad we'll come to the politics. You've talked about researchers, you've talked about the mechanisms that had come around it, but also there is hardly anyone to hold accountable. NEMA has a section of waste management within the Act. Local government has a section of waste management. Environment has a section. KCCA has a section. KCCA is carrying garbage to another district altogether in Wakiso. Where do we get the fusion? Because this can become a disaster for a country if we don't see our management of waste better.
Okay, I think what you're highlighting is a serious problem of the way we do planning in this country, in that there's a lot of balkanization and creation of silos within different government MDAs that should actually be getting together. And at one point, actually, this was driven a lot by project funding. So each one may want to claim to be doing something different from the other, and they fight for mandates because each mandate holder claiming a mandate comes with certain kinds of financing, project funding, either from government or from a development partner. So that actually has caused problems, not just even for the garbage, but has caused very many problems. But I wouldn't really blame KCCA for dumping rubbish in the nearby district, because when you read about the Kiteezi landfill, it's not actually just presented as a KCCA or a Wakiso matter. It's presented as the only national landfill we have, at least by the researchers who wrote in 2015. But it's good that the Deputy ED has told us there is Katavi, then there is Mukono. So there are others that are coming up. So at a certain time, there are these things which actually are national resources. It's like the way you cannot claim that Mulago is just a Kampala affair. It's a national referral hospital. So even the Kiteezi landfill is a national asset. But what we are really what you're highlighting, which should be important, is how do government MDAs that have a shared mandate come together to actualize? Because when you read in the policies identify, they clarify a role for each and everybody. But when it comes to implementation, then we have these fights, and we have not just had them in waste management. When you go to the districts, actually every district which was turned into a city, we have a crisis of garbage there. Okay, it may not be a landfill, but as you enter every city, the first thing you confront is rubbish. And again there you'll have a battle by the technical heads, but you also have a battle by the political leadership, the political arm. Then you have those who manage the markets. So there's this whole thing, and at a certain time we need to settle together and say, how do MDAs that have a shared mandate actually get together to effect this kind of thing?
Honorable Minister, when you hear this whole Kiteezi waste management of our country, when you look at how we manage waste in this country, you were in the docket longest of disaster there. When you look at this, what is your reading of the situation?
First of all, again, our thoughts are with the families that have lost their dear ones. And we pray that those that are in the hospital battling different injuries caused by this very unfortunate, painful, and ugly situation get a quick recovery. Let me take you back to, I think, my little experience in 2014. Listeners, in 2014, the University of Central London invited Uganda to participate in a report that they presented that had to do with the resilient cities. I was privileged to lead a team from this country and joined by other parts of the world. I think Central London and Tohoku University were funded by World Bank to just look at how the cities of today must develop some resilience and in preparation for what is going to happen in the next few years. By 2050, we shall be having 7 billion people living in cities. 7 billion. So the phenomenon of rural-urban migration is reversible. And they define a resilient city as a city that attempts to answer about 4 things. The first one is a city that has planned residential areas that are accessible. And I was privileged in that conference to speak about my Muyenga here. And I described the Muyenga to those people as a rich man's slum. And they asked me, why do you call your suburb in your city a rich man's slum? I told that conference that how can you have a place like Muyenga, and I know my people from Muyenga watching me very keenly, a place like Muyenga where you can have a very expensive property, a building of about probably 15 billion or more, but cannot be accessed by fire brigade. You can't access it by fire brigade, and it is the residence of a very important Ugandan or diplomat. It cannot be accessed by fire brigade. And if he calls a 999 police response and he gets somebody pulling from the other side, he has sometimes to reverse for 100 meters in order for the 999 to access the gate. That's what's happening in Muyenga. Mm. And if you want, if you want a 999 support, if you want an ambulance, the same thing. That is Muyenga. Engineer Luimbaze, the only planned part of the city of Kampala is Kololo, is Bugolobi, and Nakasero. The rest has been to whom it may concern. So access is critical. The second one is, how can we manage waste management? And that's going to be it is not only in Uganda, this is not only unique to Kampala capital city, but the rest of the cities, engineer, have had to wake up and address this reality very critically. Because apart from just turning a garbage into a mountain that has been such a lethal mountain, imagine the stench that visits you 500 meters away, even if they did not settle there. The human beings who sit, say, like about 500 to 1 kilometer away in that place, you can be very sure that with the time they will develop some ailment. Hmm. So that has been a challenge. The fourth one was, I think, to do with informal settlements, what we call slums. As we move from the rural areas coming to the cities, and we don't, as we, those of us who are responsible for management, don't very critically address the question of organized settlements in the cities, we are going to be overwhelmed. And this is precisely what's happening. Today, as we talk, all our attention is in Kiteezi. But I can tell you, meteorology is telling us the rains are going to increase in the next 1 month up to probably around at the end of September, beginning of October. What is going to happen to Bwaise? We are going to have a flood there that is likely to kill people. And then we'll come back here again. So what haven't we done right? I think first, yes, as ministry responsible for disaster management then, we came up with the disaster management policy, and I'm happy that the commissioner is here. The policy is there, but like we have prepared very many policies, I think sometimes operationalizing these policies have been our problem. And like you again correctly said, the professor said, I think our challenge is this business of operating in the silos. We watch KCCA as KCCA, or KCCA one doesn't want to be touched because it is our thing. And then the other systems of government also think it is their thing. And that symphony that is critical in making things move is lost. What does this mean now? For every dark cloud, there should be a silver lining. We have lost people, yes, very unfortunate. We have so many people injured, very unfortunate. But this is a wake-up call to all of us. We now have 11 cities. What arrangement is in Mbale? What arrangement is in Mbarara? So that they don't walk the path that Kampala capital city has walked. What arrangement is in Soroti? What arrangement is in place in Igulu, in Ilira, in Fort Portal, in Arua? Because I can tell you, Nyangweso, if you went to Soroti today, you will see heaps of garbage next to a very beautiful market. Very beautiful market. Heaps of garbage. And next to it, they are selling very nice fish from Lake Kyoga. Then you ask yourself, what is going on? So I think we need to wake up, Kampala capital city providing leadership for the city here and maybe so that others can emulate, but the ministry responsible, the main ministry for disaster preparedness, disaster management, and so what should a resilient city be? In my view, a resilient city is that city that must prevent shocks that are preventable. And if it cannot prevent shocks, then it should be able to absorb shocks as they happen. And when they absorb shocks, then they must prepare the communities to recover from those shocks. The question is, how prepared are we to prevent shocks? Because these shocks are going to happen. Some will be natural, some will be man-made. They are going to continue happening for as long as communities continue piling in the cities. So how prepared are we? So I want to say, engineer, the truth is that, yes, resources may not have been availed in time, but the reality is that we did not pay adequate attention to this challenge. We saw it coming, but we thought maybe we could just wish it away. That's my reading of the situation. We saw it coming, but the thinking was that it will just be wished away, it will not happen. That kind of thing defines those of us. For us in the RO ranks, when we see a problem, we confront it the way it is. That's how we manage the LRA. You know, that's how we manage the LRA. We saw it coming, and this was coming. Can you imagine a mountain of this, and then even technical people telling us there seems to be dents here, and these dents present a challenge. They are likely to present as a challenge. So it needed just heavy rain to saturate that soil, and it didn't even need anything to get. Just saturate in Teso, where we have flat terrain, there is what we call waterlogging. Waterlogging right now, we'll be talking about it when we're concluding this show, to just alert again the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, all the managers, that there are areas which are suffering waterlogging now because they are flat. The topography is such that it is flat, but the rains are pounding the place to the extent that now water may not even, you don't see it, but if you move it, it's like all clay. The whole place is just like mud. So that phenomenon of waterlogging characterizes many parts. That is what you saw in this heap. It got waterlogged, and with the heavy thing, it just came like a landslide in Budoda. And that's what exactly happened. So it's unfortunate it happened in the first place. It's embarrassing, it's painful, but we must learn a lesson or two from it. And we are going to learn. We are going to take it up. I'm sure it's going to be something that we're going to discuss in the cabinet, and we're going to propose very strong solutions, including asking these experts in KCCA to borrow ideas from countries like Singapore that have managed to turn waste into energy.
And we're going to come to that, and we're going to come to that, especially being that they had done some research in that area. But let's get to the cities. You as the Minister of Works, we look at these cities, 11 of them. Are they prepared for any eventuality, especially piggy banking on what happened in Kiteezi?
Just like I said, this is a wake-up call. First of all, access is critical. I have been to, for example, my small municipality of Kumi, where you see a pile of trailers carrying inflammable products along the highway. It's just a disaster waiting to happen. And many other cities. I can assure you, from this, we are going to take the ministry responsible, particularly our colleagues in local government, Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, to really see how to operationalize some of the laws and policies that we have. Because I can tell you, we are not in a crisis of lack of laws. The laws are there. The policies are there. What is important is to actualize and operationalize most of them.
Well, Honorable Minister, when do we bite? When do we stop talking and act on these policies?
I think the biting sometimes is where there is a problem. And this is, I could hear, was it the engineer Luimba professor? The KCCA tried to say, don't move beyond this. And then some politician says, no, leave my voters. I think this is the contradiction we have. We have cheap populists, sometimes calling themselves leaders. Cheap populists calling themselves, and I say this with a very heavy heart. You have just seen sometimes the kind of controversy we have here in this city with the hawkers. We say we don't want them in the streets. Then somebody says, leave them, we are going to fight you, and something like that. We don't want borders in a certain radius in the business district of Kampala. And then, so we sometimes have cheap populists and we masquerading as leaders.
But Honorable Minister, before I get to Jimmy, Ugandans are not gullible that they don't see what is good for them. They see, like Engineer Limbas just said, the ones in Kiteezi saw, actually some of the clips that we played, they saw how dangerous it was. Let's leave the populists. The implementation from government is wanting. At what point does government step up and every Ugandan life matters?
I think that's where, for example, maybe resources, but resources I think should not be really a big factor, engineer. We are better than that, in my opinion. We could have done better than that. If resources are real, if the problem was brought to the table of the final decision, what I always call political high command, you come to, somebody comes to cabinet and say, you cabinet ministers, if we don't do this, these are the likely ramifications. We need the resources to make this happen. And anybody who defies this, we suggest this to happen. I can assure you action should have been taken. But I think lamentations are not now very helpful. What is critical now is to forge a way forward.
And we're going to come to that.
What have we learned from this?
Jimmy, coming to you, did you see this coming from the different reports you have privy to, from Makere to different development partners? Did you see this coming, and were you prepared for it?
Thank you so much. Yes, as the Ministry for Disaster Preparedness and Management in the country, one thing I would like to inform you is that we have done risk mapping of most of the parts of the country for all the specific hazards, the different hazards in the country. We have knowledge of what is likely to occur in any part of the country. And even Kampala, we have the hazard risk and vulnerability map for Kampala. So it comes out with all the different aspects of the city that need to be addressed. So Kampala city is, first of all, a city that during daytime has about 11 million people, and in the night 1.5 million. Now all this population puts a lot of pressure in the city to be provided for with services. Services in terms of transport, services, properly planned transport, and that means we need services like rail services, bus rapid transport, and all this. So within Kampala we have the challenge of flash floods, flooding, because people have encroached on wetlands, there are settlements within the wetlands. We have challenges of road traffic accidents because of narrow roads, and also we don't have pathways specifically for pedestrians. In fact, as to inform you again, just this morning, early morning, around 6 a.m., no, coming to 7 a.m., just along Ginger Road, I found somebody had been crushed. It was a bicycle cyclist. He had been crushed, I think, either in the early hours of the night or late in the night. But when we have planning, properly improved physical planning for different aspects of the city and the population, you find that these instances, risks, disaster occurrences to the population are minimized. So Kiteezi landfill has been something, a disaster in waiting. And as Ministry for Disaster Preparedness, we do plan for disaster. First, we do prepare for disasters in the country, and in this we normally have early warning. And in fact, the reports from the researchers forms part of what we call early warning information. So once you have that from the research, from the institutions and from the research institutions or the universities, that information is supposed to be used to plan, to request for resources to solve a problem. But also, there is an aspect of the vulnerability of the population. You find that the landfill has been in existence, but also construction of houses around the landfill has been ongoing. This is something that should have been prevented or minimized by reducing, allowing, licensing people to develop or construct houses around those places. So we are in this kind of situation where we have now 30 bodies, people who have died, but still recovery, it's no longer now rescue and search, because over 72 hours, you can no longer talk about rescue and search, it's now recovery. So recovery efforts are going on. On the ground, we have 14 excavators working for the whole day. And we're actually supposed to be working even in the night. However, the lighting during night is not good. And in this, it means that if you proceed with the night process, with the night program, you are going to end up, if there was anybody to recover, any dead body to recover, you will end up destroying and crashing because the lights are not able to provide proper lighting. So we stop maybe at 8 p.m. like that. A lot of operations are going on down there. We have displacement. We have people in a camp now. In Kiteezi Church of Uganda Primary School, we have a camp, IDP camp, with so far 175 people, with the 84 males, and then children. We have 10 pregnant women, with one about to give birth in a month's time. So the situation is as it is there. It's a very tough situation, and this is actually a complex emergency. This you categorize under the complex emergency because there are so many aspects of the community and the society that is being impacted. And right now, as we talk here, we are still trying to solve the problem of what is the alternative place of dumping the garbage. Yes, we have identified, we have Ndundu, we have Menvu, we have the Nkumba, and so forth. But all these places, whereas they are there, they are not as big as the Kiteezi landfill as it has been. But also they have not been prepared properly to absorb the 2,500 tons of garbage from Kampala and the neighboring communities or societies. So this is something that needs to be addressed. So Uganda as a country, yes, as the Honorable Minister has mentioned, there is need for us to prepare and to improve on our physical planning. Physical planning as a country is very important. In other countries, like I saw in China, before a population is allowed to settle in any environment, the country first, they go and develop the place, they map out the different services, they construct houses, they put up the markets, the different services, different centers, and then from there the people can now begin to occupy. There already is water, there is, but here, as a country, we take the services, follow the people as they've already established what? Settlements. Now, by the time you come to intervene to bring the services, the water services, the electricity, the roads, and making sure they are wide enough, you find that you are now struggling with the community that is already saying we have settled, don't disturb us.
Okay.
Yes.
Jimmy, what is with the 5 million? Is it a standard procedure for any disaster? That is a joke, let's leave that one. But let me ask, with all these disasters,
Yes.
what is the interaction between you as the Ministry of Disaster and the different sectors?
Yes, thank you so much.
Because you seem to be pointing fingers, and I thought we left sectors to go to programs.
Yes.
So what is your interaction like?
So our interaction is in this way. The policy for national disaster preparedness and management policy in the country that was put in place in approved in 2010. This policy identifies the different stakeholders. We have several hazards in the country. We have flooding, we have droughts, dry spells, we have earthquakes. We know what we interact with. We have lightning, we have hailstorms. Now, each hazard has a specific requirements in terms of handling. And landslides and mudslides, yes. It requires different expertise. So in this way, the policy for every hazard identifies key institutions and also puts in place, identifies the lead institution. So look at, for example, a hazard like flooding, management of the floods, prevention of floods, mitigation of the floods problem, even providing early warning information. You find that Ministry of Water and Environment is the lead institution in it, because issues of environment and water management is in their docket. So the policy identifies, and in identifying these sectors or institutions, one, it expects that we work together with them to make sure there are preventive measures put in place to prevent a situation of going into a disaster situation. Look at, for example, we've had the issue of flooding around the Lake Victoria shores in the recent past, I think right from 2020, 2021. Now, the water body is Lake Victoria. Then we have a challenge of rising water levels in the lakes. Now, Minister of Water and Environment knows that people should live at least 200 meters away from the water body. But settlements have gone close to the water bodies. But now, leave that alone. If the water levels are rising, who is to inform the country? It is the Ministry of Water. It provides information to all of us because they have the water measuring gauges within the water bodies, both the lakes and rivers.
Jimmy, let me stop you there. Yes. Every time someone does not want to do something, they hide behind a policy. I'll come back to you on that one. We're being joined by Dr. Amanda Ngaburano, who is here with us, the chairperson of the National Physical Planning Body. And it's very good to have you. Thank you for making the journey from Gulu and being here in time.
Thank you, Timothy.
But when you heard about Kiteezi, and I was also reading about how Gulu is managing West there, when you heard about Kiteezi and the big picture of us as a country, how we manage West, what came to your mind?
Exactly what he has been talking about, Timothy. Thank you very much. By the way, good evening, viewer. And apologies, I've had a return trip from Gulu. And you could see that there are some hazardous situations along the journey, just like the Kiteezi situation. But like he has been mentioning, it's a lot so much related to physical planning. Because it's a matter, garbage is a matter of spatial interaction. It's a spatial complex aspect, whereby we have to eat, generate, produce, move, but also dispose of it. So that is an interaction with different aspects. There are settlements, there are businesses, so the location of things matters a lot. So that means that the deliberate plan in the first instance is a key aspect of avoiding or taking care of such a thing. Because solid waste management is part of human being, human welfare. It has to be managed right from the generation to disposal to reuse to whatever method we have to get it. So I'm coming to that because it's complex, like I mentioned. It's over space. It requires space, technology, human capital development. It requires funding. It requires a comprehensive policy and collective responsibility, just like any other spatial aspect in the complexity of space. Spatial is just to mean space or land. Now, you have transportation networks, utility lines, you have solid waste management, you have housing, industrialization, agriculture, tourism, etc. All of them are competing. And now for a case of a city like ours, or cities like ours in Uganda and Africa, we have other situations that we have to deal with, like disease, health. We have limited resources, but the demand of those resources is so high, the population growth is so high, the capacity on the ground is so thin, the funding is so thin. So we tend to find ourselves in a situation of letting it be, hoping that it will be sorted. Now, that is where our problem is. We must identify key physical planning interventions that we should prioritize, Honorable Minister. I'm happy that you're here. Prioritization is key. To me, physical planning should come second after security in a nation, in a country. Because when space has conflict in terms of those aspects, you are creating a situation of wars between existence of things that have to make the human well-being possible, but also development, meaningful development. Because if we just make one step forward and 10 steps backwards, what development is that? Now, when you come to Kiteezi, he rightly mentioned those houses, it's really a very sad situation that we did not take a bold step to ask them to leave that place, because the garbage management at that point was quite complex. But there's another problem of attitude, both on the side of ourselves as professionals, as government, that's one side, but also as the side of the citizens. I don't think our citizens are ready to be told to move because there's going to be a problem tomorrow. I don't think they are ready. I also don't think we as professionals and government are ready to take that bold decision and say, we are unable
to fix this garbage management situation right now, but in the meantime, to mitigate any hazardous outcome, please move to this place. Now, who should be bold enough? We can't say it's the citizens. It has to be government. If we don't have the funding immediately, we should not leave these things to be seen and just move on like that. Otherwise, we are going to end up into a disaster relief build disaster syndrome. And a syndrome is very difficult to break. Kiteezi, Bududa, Kasese, Kilembe, they will face those disasters. We know. You mentioned correctly that we can tell, we can predict the disaster occurrence. But if we are going to depend on relief alone to solve this, and it's quiet, you saw what was happening in Entebbe. They were also worrying about garbage. Gulu today, Kiteezi was being made reference to garbage. So garbage has become the topic. Why shouldn't we avoid this? By working collectively, all sectors. We sit together, come up with a plan, a strategy, and each sector implements their role collectively.
The Honorable Minister said it very well. Planning is not our problem, even Professor. Because even Professor said it very well. The population boom in this country, where, I'll come to engineer, where they want to go in Entebbe, the population is already around the place. The 70 acres they had in somewhere on Entebbe Road is no longer there. The 136 they have in Mukono in Ndundu has already a population around it. It seems like we're taking disaster to where the residentials are.
Why?
As national physical plan, yes.
There are suggestions that instead of moving the landfill to Dundu, why not move the people who are displaced to Dundu so that you keep the Kiteezi problem there? And you see, as we are saying this, there is another problem occurring. Where there are no landfills, people actually dump in swamps.
Exactly.
And create a flooding situation. As we are talking about Kiteezi and the rest, people are predicting another disaster in Kasokoso, not just coming from garbage, but the mere fact that the topography of how people are built in Kasokoso, the excavation, and there's so many pit latrines, all of which collect water underneath. That's also another disaster. So it's not really that we lack strategies, but capacity to enforce those strategies. For example, Kiteezi, many of those homes were not there when the landfill started. People have just simply moved in because the population grows, people don't have where to go, so the cheaper land looks like the swamp land, the land which is government, the government buffer. That's where we are all running. So many of those homes were not there when the landfill in Kiteezi was starting. We have been associated with Kiteezi for a long time. They were not there.
Amanda, you were finishing a point, but also as national physical planning, what are you doing? Because the Honorable Minister said, the Honorable Minister said it very well. The only places that are planned for are Nakasero, Kololo. What are you really doing?
Even we had, so anyway, I have to update you and the viewer that yesterday we had a meeting which actually expired our tenure. Because of the RAPEX rationalization, the board functions are going to National Planning Authority. So I'm here as a professional and a former chairperson of the National Fiscal Planning Board. That is one. But as a professional, that doesn't take away my take on this matter. If Honorable mentioned that we have the plans and Professor mentioned that we have the strategies, it is true, it's very true. But the action-oriented plus deliberate prioritization in terms of funding, it's very key. And the people will respond according to how firm our actions are towards solving those problems. If they see you not minding about Kasokoso, they will find a way of going there and they do something. Meanwhile, we are talking about Nakasero, Kololo, even Bugolobi, we have so many appeals of informalities penetrating those places. So there is no place that is going to maintain that character because we are not enforcing what we are doing. We are rather reinforcing a bad culture of not enforcing but also not complying. So my idea was, if as government at the national level, because right now we have the National Physical Development Plan, which we didn't have, by the way, for so many years. This is the first one we have had. It has also a solid waste management component. Regional physical development plans that we have also have a solid waste management component. We have seen so many municipalities, cities, districts coming with their physical development plans. Solid waste management is there. Now, the matter of landfill, it's quite a backward method of managing solid waste. We need to face it. It is a bit outdated. I thought I sounded a bit rude when I used the word backward, but it is an outdated method. And if you have benchmarked, I know we are very good at that. You should have seen, you should have seen countries that you don't even see the waste. From home, it goes into the bin and it is disposed of. But that is too ambitious. We can start small. We go to our people, our citizens, we separate, then we have other methods to reuse. There is a biofertilizer company in Kawanda that wanted rubbish to recycle, to reuse and produce manure for the farmers. And
we're going to come to that.
They did not get rubbish, they had to buy it. So why don't we think about such methods?
We're going to come to solutions there, but this is a very good pictorial view. I hope I'll send it to my producer to be able to project it on the screen. The difference between 2004 and 2020 of this landfill, especially on the settlement around it. But let me read some feedback that has come through. Someone sent something very lengthy. Wilson, an urban planner here, he says, Timothy, the question is not who slept on the job. The question is who has not slept on the job. Kiteezi's issue is just a manifestation of what happens in all sectors. For waste management to roads, to public transport, look at the border nuisance in the urban areas. Shouldn't we ask who hasn't slept on the job? It's sad that we only wake up and begin to give excuses and explanations that we could have avoided these depressing events. We have lost the true love for and commitment to serve our country. We should just desist from calling Kiteezi's site a landfill. No, it is just a waste dump site managed by ill-educated. Okay, I'll leave that one at there. There is no motivation for Uganda's government employee to deliver, given there are no possibilities of taking responsibility for errors of commission or omission. We do not see anyone taking responsibility or resigning, neither do we have any hope in the heads that will roll. In case they do, it is most likely that the low-level cadres, and they will be at that. Benjamin in Kampala. Finally, before we take a break, and this one is quite also lengthy. The most recent landfill disaster in Ethiopia occurred on July 21st and 22nd of 2024. The result was 250 deaths. However, you may be referring to the Kush landfill disaster that occurred in March 11, 2017 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, which killed 115 people. The location was Kush in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and gives the number of people dead. The number of injured is quite humongous, and also the landslides that had heavy rains there. He gives quite a number of landslides and landfills that happened there in the Philippines, India, Brazil, Sri Lanka, and thank you for all these details there. Let's take a quick break. When we come back with solutions, especially to waste management and the cities in this country. This and more after this break.
Kutosako bapapatatuwa musonga katino kulo mukaganga satulu mwezi guno gwa munana jangu kudamzu wota kuragime grounds tunyumirwe ngokuyingira jinja kuba emitwalo ebiri naye tiketi wogigulira ku MTN momo ogifuna ku mutwalo gumu ye ya VIP ya mitwalo 3 katino nyiga *165*2 noti hash oba kozesa momo app wegulire tiketi yo ku MTN momo ku bei rahisi tosuwa abayimbi bonna ab'e Kampala n'ab'e Busoga papapate netegekeddwa Douglas Rwanga ne kutusibwako MTN.
Together, we're unstoppable. Coming soon on UBC.
Welcome to Inside Broadcasting.
Sharing with you the process behind what you see on the screens.
My name is Lorene Masika Kazimoto.
Step behind the scenes and witness the magic that brings your daily broadcasts to life.
That's why I come out openly to actually tell you that I'm an investigative journalist. That even when you see me here, I'm actually investigating you guys. So you should be aware about that.
Experience the hustle, the heart, and the human stories of our on and off-air staff.
I see my phone ringing and I'm like, ooh, which number is this? I hear the president on the other line.
The president of the Republic of Uganda.
Of Uganda, yes.
Be inspired, amazed, and part of the journey that powers Uganda's most captivating TV and radio moments.
Because good broadcast comes down to an individual. They should be artistic.
This is Inside Broadcasting.
Inside Broadcasting.
Inside Broadcasting with Mark Wadula.
Coming soon on UBC.
Juko.
Yo.
Check the shopping, man. What's your secret? Haven't you heard of the parish development model, PDM? Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk. No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a portrait project, and now things are moving.
Juko. I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that. The parish development model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better. PDM, my parish, my development, my life.
I'm called Ezekiel Kate. We are staying in Busala village that is in Luka district. This is a commercial agriculture farm purely run on a family basis. We are now concentrating on coffee, and we got that coffee in 2018 from Operation Wealth Creation. NADS gave us the solar water pump, which we are currently using to put up irrigation on the farm and be able to irrigate the coffee, which is sitting on a 30-acre area. What we're able to reap out of the coffee, we're able to sell it off and make an expansion, because with irrigation you can't go wrong, but be able to pick all around the whole year. And that's all income that will be coming in. On a special thanks goes to Operation Wealth Creation, to the district local government in Luka district that has also given us the support to supervise all the work that we have been doing. And finally, NADS that gave us the solar water pump.
Welcome back from that quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. In the studio, I'm joined by Professor Sarah Sali, who is the Dean at the School of Women and Gender Affairs at Makerere University, the Deputy Executive Director of KCCA, Engineer David Luyimbazi, and also Dr. Amanda Ngabrano, who is a lecturer, but also an urban planner, and, as we have been reliably informed, former chairperson of the National Physical Planning Body. We also have Jimmy Ogwang, who is the Acting Commissioner at the Department of Disaster and Preparedness Management there, and the Honorable Francis Musa Echweru, the Minister in charge of Works. So we're discussing everything waste management, but also in view of the 11 cities, what should we be doing as Ugandans? Also, the call will be made to us as individuals on what we do after you give your garbage. Is that it? Professor, let me come to you. When we look at, we have discussed all the possible challenges that have come in with this Kiteezi. What lessons can we draw from this? Not just Kampala, not just Wakiso, but as a country.
Thank you, Timothy. I think the lessons are several, and most of them have already been discussed. One of the lessons, we need to stop planning in silos. I think problems that are overarching and that go into multiple sectors. We need those sectors working together to plan. Another key lesson we learn from this is, I think we need to manage the politics. I think it is sad, but we need to manage the politics and not seek to get political mileage from these things. Yeah, of course, first of all, I'm a person who believes, and I know that all our cities have urban plans. This country has been engaging in urban planning from as far back as historical times. I mean, even from colonial time, they had at least where a road would pass and everything. We have just wrecked those plans with politics because the experts said, don't put there, the technocrats that manage the cities say houses should be here, the drainages should be there. And as politicians, we sit in these councils and allocate where people should go, or we encourage people to move in. So it is sad that people have died, but still we are going to see posturing out of this matter. And I think that is bad. We shouldn't posture from people's tragedies. Another thing we should learn from this, and maybe it goes to both us as academics, as experts and others, is to do more dissemination of the things we have. First of all, we were all shocked that when this tragedy occurred, then there were all these papers that had been done and studies. And we initially thought, oh, maybe the scientists did these studies and they never shared information with the technocrats. But then you go to the acknowledgement page. Yes, but no, but when you go to the acknowledgement pages, they have acknowledged the KCCA they worked with. So then the question is, what happened? Could it be the transition in leadership at these bodies? Or could it be the struggle for mandates and budgets and the supplementaries as we've had? But also I think one way, other than just communicating to the technical experts, probably some of these things which are of a public concern nature should be disseminated widely. I know we don't have very many think tanks in this country, but probably this is an opportunity to have think tanks to discuss public crises like this. We have a public crisis on population, rapid population growth and urbanization. We have a crisis on limited economic development. And whatever we are seeing as economic growth is jobless economic growth. So while the GDPs and the rest are going in, they are not necessarily translating in enough jobs on the ground. That's why many people actually were surviving off that landfill. I know there's a documentary which was done like 2 months ago about that very landfill, and people were talking about the things they harvest from there and their whole livelihoods which are supported from there. Maybe that's why even people moved closer, because it was their workplace. So there's a crisis on economic development. So it's not just enough to post the GDPs and the gross national income we are making. What does that translate in actual livelihoods and jobs? That is one other lesson, but it speaks to us disseminating more so that even those who are surviving off some of these things, because it could be a landfill, it could be a swamp, it could be a road, it could be a mountain. All of these things, people need to know what risks they are working with, so that when they are buffers, we all respect the buffers. But if you're just being told this is a buffer, this thing might fall, and you've seen it there for decades and it's not falling, then you begin wondering whether it will really fall. It's like when people are told at Entebbe, you know, when we grew up in Entebbe, it was an actual peninsula, in that the water was on both ways of the road. People have successfully filled the other side of the road and constructed there. So when people are told that actually there was a lake there and water will always find its path, people doubt it because they've never seen it. Then when it floods, then everyone is in crisis mode that the water has flooded. We grew up with the lake straddling both sides of the road. So I think we need more information dissemination. We need people to revisit their histories more. But also I think we need to do more in terms of giving people alternative livelihoods. We also need to respect the experts, because there's a reason why they are experts. But also to respect what counts as government properties. So if government has put a road reserve and there's something like that, people need to respect it, because if you don't respect it, there are catastrophes which are going to come. You will build in a road reserve and a truck will enter. There's a reason why engineers leave road reserves. So I think let's learn to listen to the experts and respect them. But also another problem which is portrayed enough, which is highlighted in African cities, is very much the top-down planning. So probably the planners and the experts need to plan more with the people so that there's shared information. And of course, we also need more technology, we need more resources. And as a poor country, we need to plan these cities around the population, the kind of populations we have. Otherwise, we shall continue being overwhelmed. But for starters, the big crisis now is the politics overriding the technical expertise, overriding the economic sense, and that creates a problem. Thank you.
And Professor, just staying with you before I come to Engineer Luimbazi, two things that really, you talked about policies, respect the experts that are there, but how much are we domesticating these for the consumption of our population? But also in tandem with that question, our population boom, 10 years ago, 34 million. 10 years later, 11 million added to the 34, 45.9 million. It seems our growth as a population is high, yet the land is not growing as fast as the population. How do we mitigate that?
Well, Timothy, of course, it depends on how you come to it. Some of us, we shall see high population growth. Others will see it not as high population growth, but limited opportunities. So do we control the people, or do we increase the opportunities to enable people to survive? Because actually there are people who don't believe we have high population growth. It's just that we have few cities, few jobs, few services, few roads, few resources. So the people who are in those spaces then look like they are too many. But whichever way we look at it, you need to manage the kind of population. I know it was Minister Chwero who talked about the resilient cities. If you also look at the MDGs, I think there's SDG number 11, which talks about sustainable cities. So this population will always grow, because indeed we also need people for markets and the rest, and to do a number of things. But I think those who plan for the population, National Planning Authority, Population Council, urban authorities, need to find a way of matching the resources with the increase in people, because if they don't do that, then they are going to be overwhelmed. And the resources, they are the tangibles like housing, like services, but also the capacity, the human capital development. Because if you don't do that and you keep your population at a certain base level, then you'll find they cannot take advantage of the increasing economic opportunities. They will have to survive off dumps. They will have to settle in swamps. They will have to do things actually which put them at risk. So depends. If you're looking at the available opportunities, the population may be high, but can we explore expanding the opportunities so that the population fits within the resources we have?
The last bit that you have not responded, localization of these policies, because we need it to reach the last mile.
It depends on what you call localization, but maybe that's what we call dissemination, because in as much as the experts here are Ugandan, we assume that is local enough. But I appreciate what you're saying, and we have been accused about this as universities, that we really just care about our donors, and then when we go international, we present, we have finished. We account to the donor, we come back and do our thing. And largely it is also because universities emerge from a Western mode of the academy, and so an academic is struggling to be locally relevant, but also globally competitive. So that creates a problem. Then when you come to our planners, our policy planners in government, with a lot of funding also coming from development partners, they are also trying to see things working in a particular way, and that's why everything has to be benchmarked according to a certain city. And that creates a problem. If you are building a city in Kampala, why benchmark on New York? Of course, maybe there will be some similarities, but there will be differences. And as you say, the challenge is that whatever benchmarks then becomes the blueprint. And they want to squeeze this African city into the growth path of the other city, forgetting the context, forgetting the history, forgetting the economics and the politics that makes those cities tick, and the culture, of course. So I think the point you raise is very important. We can benchmark, we can read the books, but there's a need to contextualize with what we have. For example, one of the big problems we have with garbage in cities, and I've said this today, I mean many times here, in African cities, is that our food systems are not matched with the infrastructure we have. If you're going to eat matoke, matoke comes with peelings, it comes with banana leaves, it comes with, but do we have mechanisms to process and deal with that waste in a quick manner? We don't. So we are assuming that, and the way our toilets are built and everything, they're built on people who eat rice and things like that, and things easily get disposed of. So you have that, and that means as we plan for around these cities, we may need to invest in things that deal with the kind of rubbish or with the kind of problems that we create. Incinerators, I don't know what else will go into there. But if we are just dumping and we are eating matoke and we are eating all these things, that's why 67% of the garbage in our landfills is bio-waste. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Engineer Luimbazi, I know KCCA from Saturday to today has received the brunt of this Kiteezi landfill. And I also know that Ndundu, when some of your people went there, people were not kind, neither in Nkumba. There's a lot that KCCA is suffering. But let me ask, what are the alternatives to waste management minus landfills?
I wanted to set my own question.
You can do that.
I wanted to kind of tackle the question, what lessons have we learned from what happened in Kiteezi? I think we should learn that there's a lot of individual responsibility that comes with what we do. If we continue not respecting the physical planning laws, the building regulations of the country, we put ourselves in danger. As the Honorable Minister of Works said, despite resources being constrained, if the physical planning laws had been respected, no life would have been lost, even if we didn't have resources. So sometimes we create crises which could have been avoided. Right now, all our wetlands have been invaded. I think since 1986, we've lost about 50% of our wetland cover. That is increasing the prevalence of flooding in the city. People die, by the way, just because they are unaccounted for, probably even more than we see in Kiteezi whenever there rains. Drainages have been invaded because it is perceived to be free land. So this kind of pressures we put on the system cost the government a lot of money. Now we're looking for vital resources to be able to correct a man-made problem. Yes, it is easy to blame KCCA, but look at what the individual who's contravening the laws of the land is doing. So ask not what government should do, but also what should you do to be able to make the country better. So individual responsibility, mindset change is very critical. Some of these problems are indeed avoidable. It's easy to criticize us as part of government, but there's a lot of problems coming from the way we conduct ourselves. Then resource allocation should be, I think, should be risk-based. What are the consequences of not providing financing for a particular activity? Like, I mean, of course, challenges of flooding in the city. I'll talk about flooding. We need to line our drains. We need to have a robust drainage system. The damage we do to our roads, to property, due to lack of money for drainage management. So let's prioritize based on the risks and consequences of not providing resources. Then, of course, as Amanda said, physical planning should be prioritized. The arrangement of space is very critical to the functioning of a city or of a country. If a place is designated as a residential area, let it be. Industry, let it be. Because this is incorporated in the long-term plan of the country. These are well thought through processes that are intended to spur economic development. Then mature politics. As we're trying, as again Honorable Ichuru mentioned, we're trying to organize border borders. The politicians are looking at voters. We're trying to remove people from wetlands. Politicians are looking at voters, not looking at the kind of life those people lead. They live a very, very difficult life. When it rains in those wetlands, people stay awake. The children who don't have a chance to wake up die. Because when those flash floods come, they drown. So the situation is dire there. So let's have mature politics. Let's not prioritize looking at people as voters. Look at them as your children, your cousins, fathers, mothers, and something like that before you think of them as voters. Then we need to prioritize cities. In cities, we have high densities of population compared to rural areas. So when you have a problem in the city, the strike is very, very acute because there are more people per square meter than you will find in a rural area. So again, you find that many times you don't prioritize financing cities to make sure that, because you have a conglomeration of people in one small space. So we need to prioritize cities. So I thought I would be able to carry on with her question because it's a big message to the public to be able to stop accusing government of not doing what it does when we, the citizens, are not doing what we ought to do.
We're going to come to collective responsibility, But what are the alternatives to landfill, especially in waste management?
Okay, where we're moving, we want to move towards a zero waste strategy. Actually, what we call waste is actually can be turned into value. Waste can generate energy. Waste can generate briquettes, which can be used in the place of charcoal, saving forest cover, manure and fertilizer, animal feed, especially organic waste can be used to generate feed for fish and chicken. So there are a lot of potential outputs. So if we sort and separate waste, we can be able to establish industries. Even if government doesn't have money, there are many private sector investors who are ready to do it. All government has to provide is a subsidy in many cases, because converting inorganic waste into energy, the cost of production is higher than the tariff government can buy the energy at. So, for example, the industry, the factory we're trying to set up in Dundu, I think they're trying to provide power at about 12 US cents, yet government is going to buy it at 8. So we need to provide a subsidy of the difference. So if we move the direction, there'll be no need for landfills. Waste becomes wealth. So everyone, whenever you have a bottle of water, in fact, in some countries you have empty bottles of water, you get a bottle of water. So there is value. So you kind of value your waste. You can get something of value out of it.
And my final question before I get to Dr. Amanda is, what can KCCA do? I know money has been something you've talked about. Honorable said money shouldn't be a problem. But what can you do without money to mitigate such crises?
Without money, if we have individual discipline, we can do very well. Many of the problems we have are man-made, coming out of indiscipline of citizens.
Interesting. Dr. Amanda, let me come to you. When we talk about sustainable waste management, I know engineers hinted in it. How is it attainable in this country?
It's very attainable, because although Professor was mentioning that we eat matoke, so we have a structure of toilets for rice. I think matoke would really be easily manageable and sustainably dealt with as an organic waste. Matoke, how we prepare it, the banana leaves, the fibers, the peelings. I think all those are some of the things that Engineer Limbas was talking about that can be recycled into useful things that we need for continuity. But the sustainable way indeed begins with a complete chain of how it will be managed, right from the source until the final position or location of disposal. However, the physical planning aspect has to still be in place, because we can actually have waste move from homes straight to where it has to be through the pipeline. And we've seen that it's possible. Just that we need to have a risk-based analysis, as he has mentioned, but we also need to prioritize. If really we think waste is going to be our big problem, we need to focus on it as a country. If we think public transport is now going to be a problem, we need to focus on it. The last few days, weeks, we have seen NEMA up in arms on wetlands. And I think that's a focus on something that we are trying to mitigate to avoid risks. Sustainably, we can do it, it's manageable. However, Engineer Limbazi, this thing of saying that the citizens are the ones that should change the attitude, even the officials responsible from the regulatory side have to be responsible. They must have discipline. If we can find out from Kiteezi who had an approval, a development permission, we might be surprised. You might find these people, some of them had some stamps from some officials for them to exist in that place. Kasokoso, we need to find out and have an audit of who approved, what is approved, so that we take responsibility in equal measure or in a balanced way. Then we shall be able to address the real problem. The sustainable aspect that we need to consider, we need energy. And this goes beyond waste, by the way. If you go to a place like Karamoja, it's dark, it's hot, it has a lot of sun, but it's dark. Where is solar? let's cut across all those aspects. As Wilson actually mentioned in his comment, this garbage thing is an eye-opener because it cuts across so many aspects which we can sustainably address. So why don't we prioritize at least 4? To me, waste is a very bad thing to manage in a city. If you don't manage it, it exposes you. You remember a time when we used to have flies in the city? The green ones. Green, bluish, gray. We had different colors of flies, big ones. And that was you cannot deal with waste in such a way. So it means it's a priority for any city to be clean, to be seen clean. There are some cities you go to and you think they don't generate waste because you don't see it. You don't see any landfill. You don't see where they dispose of it from. We have public transport. You talked about an accident of a road user this morning. Public transport, what do we need? Mass transit. We need to move gradually. As Professor mentioned, there's a socio-economic aspect that we must be aware of in all these mitigations. As you try to relocate people from Kiteezi, as you try to improve public transport, as you try to move people from wetlands, you need a plan to absorb the socio-economic aspects, not to cause social shocks, which means we need to up our game on planning. It's a challenge on our side.
Dr. Amanda, sticking with you, there's a report I looked at that said by 2050, water will have more plastic than a fish. Doesn't that concern us, especially us, the panelists, but also the people watching us, of what the future looks like? And what should we be doing?
I think that's good information for futuristic planning, for us to be able to avoid plastics in our system. In fact, we need to upgrade and stop bringing these plastics here in a place like this, because now there are better alternatives to this. However, just like Professor mentioned, that people might think that we are overpopulated, but we might not be. It's just because we are not planning very well. Plastics, we have a lot of plastics, but there is a company that wanted to make tiles out of plastics, and they did a feasibility here. They cannot have any more plastics after 2 years of production of roofing tiles because we don't have the production capacity. You see, even waste generation is directly linked to incomes. The richer the people, the more the waste they tend to generate. If you see waste coming from a rich person's home, it's very different from waste from a poor person's home. It is true. It is very true. So it's actually like climate change. The rich nations are polluting majorly, but the impact is coming to the poor nations. It's the same thing with waste. These plastics, we don't have enough plastic for recycling for a company that wants to come and have a business case.
Why can't they do the plastics and prepare to proceed to something else?
If we cannot manage the plastics, we cannot manage the disposal, we are not ready for production.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I mentioned that it's a chain of things that we need to sit down carefully and look at. Then we shall have a very good actionable strategy.
My last question to you, especially hearing engineer and professor, almost feels like there's a knowledge gap in the population. How do we bridge that gap?
The knowledge gap?
Yes, within the population.
Now, there are two things. There is the knowledge gap for the innocent citizens who don't know, but there is arrogance and bad attitude for those who know, but they don't care and they don't want to comply. And that is the worst arrogance that we need to fight. Then there's a gap. There is a gap, Prof. And Timothy, in terms of information sharing. There is also elitism, that we experts think that we are here discussing in English. I don't know who is listening to this and following this. I hope we have other programs running elsewhere. But to bring it down
to somebody in Kapelebion,
someone down
Kisoro,
to understand, yes, the grassroots level, This is the model China used. You come from Beijing and you go deep to the villages. They have the plan of their village. They have it on their fingertips in the language that they know. So elitism is one thing that we need to get out of these things as experts. Come down, communicate, and involve the people. However, there is also abuse of the status quo, business as usual. Who will care? That's how you'll see people doing this. From their BMWs, they throw bottles, very posh cars, through the windows of their cars. That person is aware they don't need any knowledge sharing. They need attitude change and enforcement. They need to be arrested and fined. But we also have a problem of corruption. This one, I don't know how we shall get out of it. If we approve things that should not be where they should be, if we have a policy of getting rid of plastics, of caveras, and we have still failed to implement it, I don't know what we are doing. So plastics, Timothy, fish will be there, but fish will be contaminated. But plastics, for now, we don't have worrying levels or amounts because we are not collecting garbage very well.
Okay.
So it seems to be everywhere.
Thank you, Amanda. Let me bring in Jimmy. Jimmy, at what point does the department or the Ministry of Relief, Disaster Preparedness and Refugees get too proactive than being reactive? Because there are two things that you say. One, we don't have the funding. Two, we knew about it, but really, when you become proactive and stop reacting?
Thank you so much. First of all, the issue of disasters is a cycle. Most cases, what is more pronounced is when there is an event, a disaster event, or an emergency. But the cycle begins right from prevention, mitigation. We have the preparedness part of disaster management. And then when there's an incident, there is the emergency response. But also after the emergency response, we have the aspect of recovery, reconstruction, and rehabilitation. So most times, what is more attractive and more selling in terms of news and in the community is when there's an emergency, there are deaths, there are injuries, but there's always work going on. As a ministry, we do preparedness actions. It's not that we just sit and wait for an event to occur, then we react or act. No, it's not like that. Across the country, we have trained districts in contingency plans. We have trained them in disaster management. And indeed, most of the reports now from the districts, whenever there is an incident, are provided by the district local governments, the center. This is part of preparedness. We do conduct trainings. But when we're doing these trainings, obviously, the media will not come and capture us that, okay, you are preparing the population, you're preparing the communities in terms of disasters. Okay? So we are not just reactive, we are proactive. I've told you about the understanding the risk. You identify the risk, you communicate about the risk, and you then, after you've communicated, you expect the ministries, department, and agencies to actually plan to mitigate and prevent these risks. However, you've asked me that, but there's something that I want to say.
Timothy, if you could allow me, and Jimmy as well, sorry for the interruption.
Yes, please.
I had noted that word expect, that we expect the other entities to come in. Don't we need a deliberate effort for that expectation to be realized? Okay. I think there's a gap there.
All right, thank you. So I would like also to inform you that currently we are preparing what they call mainstreaming checklists. It's in the final stages. In this, in preparation of the mainstreaming checklists, this is a checklist where every ministry, department, and agency will have to prove that they are taking action against risks that are within the society. The fact is, when an entity fails to do its work and there is a problem, is when we actually find ourselves involved in rescue search, emergency operations, at the same time recovery that comes in after the whole aspect. Whereas we do the preparedness actions, but entities, let me give an example. You have issues of water for production, a challenge in water for production in certain parts of the country. Who is to provide the water for production? What is the intervention in that community and society? That if we're waiting for rain to, we're waiting for rains to facilitate agricultural production, when it fails and there is failure in crop production, there is loss of animals, both the loss of livestock, diseases coming, will it be sometimes you say that Minister of Disaster Preparedness failed to do its work? No. The institution in charge of water for production should have actually identified that challenge, that we have a hazard in this place. Let's solve it. Let's provide enough water for these people or for the community to take. But let me first leave that. There is one thing I want to say. There is a need for every individual to be risk aware. Risk awareness, at the same time taking action against the risk you've identified, is very important. All of us are potential victims of a disaster situation, wherever you are. Whether it's in your house, in your home, you can have a fire incident. It can be in your workplace, a fire incident. It can be that you're traveling and there is a flash flood across the road and you're swept away because you're running at a certain speed. So there is need for all of us to be risk aware. But even as we are risk aware and take precautions and actions, there is an aspect of having value for your life as an individual. If you live life as though it's not valuable, that's when you find that you do not try to prevent a situation that can cause loss of life. I would like to inform you that the community that was living around this landfill knew that there was a problem. And indeed, I was informed that I think around June, there is, I don't know whether it's KCCA, there was a team that moved around, I think informing people about the what? The challenge, maybe the
likely danger.
The likely danger.
The cracks and everything.
Around June, there was information circulated within the what? The community. We were up on the landfill. A part of my team went up, and I also walked across it as we're responding. But part of my team walked over that landfill, and they saw cracks on top of the landfill. In fact, they explained that when they moved towards a certain direction, the crack was small in terms of size, yes, in terms of the expansion. But as they walked back, it had widened, meaning themselves, they were at risk. So the population actually, information about a risk in a community or a society actually comes from the local community. But if the local community is aware about the risk, therefore, what is required next? You are aware about the risk, take action to prevent loss of life and loss of property.
Thank you very much. Lastly, the Honorable Minister, you, the 11 cities, the 146 districts in this country, how do we get collective responsibility to be able to mitigate this waste management, but also have sustainability of waste in this country? Dr. Amanda has talked about how waste can be turned into wealth. Engineer agrees with her. Also, Professor, how do we get collective responsibility out of us as Ugandans?
No, first of all, we must not allow development to run faster than planning. planning must, particularly for the new cities, planning must run ahead of development. In 2012, Haiti, Port-au-Prince suffered an earthquake, the big one. The population in the city never followed the building codes. So most of the buildings didn't have ring beams. So they just came down like a house of cards. As emergency teams were going to rescue each one, and I wanted the engineer Luimbasi to take note of this. The disaster in waiting in our city of Kampala and the metropolitan areas around us is that each person, even us who are here, you are keeping in your compound your poo-poo. Everybody has a septic tank in his compound, for example. Everybody has a septic. There's no connection to the lagoon where it would be taken away and treated. Now, in Port-au-Prince, the earthquake comes. It was, I think, at the 9 in the Richter, whatever scale that is used for measuring it, and all the slabs collapsed in one go. So beyond the debris that killed people, cholera killed 3 times because there was poo-poo flowing in the streets. Each time I move in this city and I see that, I just see it as a disaster waiting to happen. That's one. And so we need to go back to planning ahead of development. The second one is you go to other cities. Each time I go out of Kampala and go out of my country, of course I speak so well about my country. Green area, you can come and see the gorillas, you can, very nice people, very hospitable. Then you come back from a clean city where you can wear a white shirt for 3 days without it getting soiled. The moment you touch down in Entebbe, you see caveras flying all over the place. You have been in a city where there are no caveras. We must painfully go back to the drawing board. We had, as cabinet, decided to ban polythene papers, ban it, and there are now better alternatives that are biodegradable. Somehow it was choked somewhere, and we are back to square one. So we must, I am going to raise this to colleagues, particularly trade and all those people. Can we come back to cabinet and say we ban this? Because when we are talking of even solid waste, cities that have managed, first of all, this kind of things are finding it very easy to recycle the other degradable materials. They are very easy to recycle. So that's the second challenge. The third one is mindset now. I don't really blame the ordinary poor man in Amuria. It is we who speak English and Kiswahili. What you have just correctly, Dr. Manda said, a few days ago I was coming back from the east. Between Tirinyi and entering Iganga, I was moving in a pickup truck. Sometimes people wonder, is this really a minister? I was moving in a pickup truck coming back here. I meet this powerful Land Cruiser heading to east, probably to Teso, Bugwere, or wherever. And the man literally draws whatever and it tosses out a lot of bottles and the bones. I think they had burned some chicken from that. Usually, and this is where people don't understand me sometimes. Usually what I do, I tell my driver, stop and give that man a chase. And sometimes when I catch up with them, the results have not been good. You are in a Land Cruiser. That's not a primitive person. That's not a village person. You are in a Land Cruiser. And you take your water, you take some things with the plastic, whatever, and then you open the window and toss it on the highway. What a reckless human Uganda. In fact, like if he's watching me, whoever did that, that's a primitive person. Primitive, educated person. So we have a mindset problem. If we, the elite, led by example, if we led by example, the other people would follow us. Now, this one of pushing people now, like what you see in Kasokoso, what the professor was talking about, it is the way we behave, we the elite again. I can assure you, the reclaiming of wetlands in the city is done by the rich, by the elite. And this pushes now people also now to go to the rock. This rock you are talking about in Kasokoso. You know, people are chipping the stones. They have chipped it to the extent that now there is a huge stone sitting, just waiting to be triggered by some small slide until it come down. But these ones are learning from those of us who are educated. And so there is need for us first make some policies and enforce them. Like this one of plastic materials, I really want it to come back to cabinet. We're going to propose to the people who brought it the other time. Unfortunately, at that time, I am told, we had passed it, but it was shot down by some few cabinet colleagues, whom I'm told some of them have investments in producing polythene. They must be watching me now and saying this man is not a kind person. They produce polythene papers, and for them, it is over their dead bodies. They must have them. So we need to come back there. Now, what should we do for the cities that are young, my Soroti, my Lira, my Mbarara, my Fort Portal? Kiteezi must be a warning shot. That must tell you that if you don't go the direction of proper planning, you end up. In fact, before I came here, when the land I was here, somebody who's a development expert told me, you go and tell engineer that me, I'm a development doctor. If they ask me to prescribe a remedy for Kampala, I would first pronounce Kampala capital city terminally ill with the multiple organ failure. And what will be done, I said now terminal ill, does it mean Kampala cannot recover? They said we may have to keep Kampala on palliative care because it's going to die. And that's a painful, very painful. People think not much can be done to make Kampala livable. But I think those of us who are in leadership must deliberately do some things to make Kampala livable, because we don't have another, we have the adoptions, but this is our capital city. This is our capital city. So I think it comes to policy, it comes to resources, it comes to management of those resources. Because we can also give resources to you and your team. You have seen me sometimes stop somewhere. I think remember the other day, engineer, I called you. Since I became minister responsible for roads, I feel pain sometimes when I see a pothole in a place where it is not supposed to be. So I stop and call the people. I say, KCCA, why is this pothole forming in a new road? Why I sometimes stop even in Gulu, because before that I used to think, okay, it's a responsibility of somebody else. But now it's like it's personal. It's personal. So I went between Mulago and Kamocha. I had found your team. There is a way you do your things. You cut first a part of the road that either you want to find a way, I don't know what you call it in your engineering. You cut part of the road, then you leave it for a week before it is filled. But this is a road which is removing my mother from the hospital who have just given birth. And so I asked, why did you do this before? So there is a problem of sometimes managing resources.
Okay.
And very sharp for all tires. So I called my friends. I called this officer. I say, I am here between Mulago and Kamocha. I am seeing they have cut, and I'm told they started last week. Then they said, you know, the resources for film, why did you move into CAT before you organize the resources? So sometimes we can even talk about resources, but I think it's a question of how do we manage the little that we have.
Okay.
That to me is extremely critical.
Honorable Minister, you talked about the one who threw out the bottles. That's where they talk about education going through you and you don't go through education.
And unfortunately.
I'm going to give parting shots, and I'll start with Professor, I'll go to Engineer, Dr. Amanda, Jimmy, and then finally the Honorable Minister. A minute each. I'll start with the Professor here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Timothy, and our viewers. To do it differently, today I'm going to read a verse to make my point. I'm going to read from Romans chapter 13, verse 4 to 7. I am. So, but the issue is, the verse is, for the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath to bring punishment to the wrongdoer. And I'm not reading this just for the people, but to remind government people on this panel that you have a responsibility. You know, in Uganda, each time you raise a matter to an office bearer, you're told the other four fingers are pointing at you. What we take the responsibility as human beings because we are individually culpable, and that is true. But the reason you have a government, the reason governments rose in these old centuries during the social contract between man and the state was because of the appreciation that human beings have so many multiple interests, which sometimes will always conflict. So you will have a plan not to build in a wetland, you'll have a plan not to move near a landfill, people will use their clout to move there. What should governments do? The government's role is not just to tell us how the people have been irresponsible. That one we know, because that's what we are. We are millions of people, each with million different interests. The reason you have a government, whether whichever arm you're dealing with, is to be able to harmonize and to mediate and to say, okay, if these are your interests and these ones are the other interests and they're conflicting like this is how we roll. I think what we have seen, maybe it's an outcrop of neoliberalism, is the government taking a back seat and becoming an analyst all the time. And normally the analysis is to blame the people. So the people have those problems and they have committed those crimes. But government needs to reach a level and justify its existence at that level. If you're a local government official in charge of planning at that level, what is the justification for your being there? Okay? If you're in KCCA like my good neighbor here, what is your justification for being there as you see people build 5 meters from a landfill, when according to your expert advice, it should be 500 meters?
Okay.
So the point I'm trying to say is government needs to take charge, it needs to be more responsible, and when such things happen and they have not been responsible, they also need to take the blame in good faith and do better. It cannot always be individual. Let's justify people's salaries here. Thank you.
Wow. In Uganda they say,
yeah.
But over to the engineer.
No, all of us in whatever responsibility.
Quoted.
He says that it is.
Okay, yes. While we take individual, responsibility as public servants, for me, my message, I'm going to commiserate with the people of Kiteezi who lost a lot of life. The thoughts of KCCA are with the families who have lost people and those who have got injuries as well. I want to assure you that government is going to do everything possible to make sure that all those who've lost lives are recovered. Those who are going to be displaced are catered for to make sure they're in a good place.
Thank you very much. Dr. Amanda?
Thank you, Timothy. I think I would like to just highlight just 4 issues. One is at a national level, because it's not only about Kampala, we are talking about also the 10 new cities and other urban authorities that are coming up. If we continue investing in the GKMA at the expense of other parts of the country, I think we are not going to have that 70% really per se of the contribution of the GDP from the GKMA, because we need to compute what we are losing as we generate the 70% within GKMA. People are finding it easier to come and concentrate here because we are over-concentrating investments here. So at a national level, let us redistribute, redirect investments and catalyze growth elsewhere so that people start going away. Then we release pressure from the authority and also the comfort of the human beings around. The second issue is the dissemination. Let us try to improve our communication strategy. Let us stop elitism, break down the communication in different languages and prepare our citizens. The third, which is the second last, is that we should be reminded in our capacities that it's a constitutional right for every citizen of Uganda to live in a safe, healthy, and livable environment. So we stand a risk of even being sued, because if the environment is unhealthy, we need to come up, as Professor says, and we try to communicate. And lastly, enforcement is one area we have feared to do. We are so scared to enforce, even when it is so obvious. Like he mentioned, we can easily enforce with the poor citizens, but enforcing with a big investment in a wetland, we have failed to do that. Let us go for the big fish in these problems, and we send a signal. Actually, we shall be saving their investments for the future.
Thank you. Jimmy?
Yeah, mine will be short. Thank you so much. I would like to, first of all, say that the incident of Kiteezi should not be something to politicize about. And so we should look at it in a way that we should now look at how to solve the problems better, but not politicize it. Because already we have a community that is in pain. At the same time, also to the media, that let's report responsibly and also accurately, because within the media we have misinformation, and this is not good for our country and also the people. But also what my colleague has just mentioned is enforcement. For whatever each MDA is supposed to do, let's try to enforce and make sure we're able to guide the population. It's just like a child at home. If you don't guide a child and inform a child this is wrong, move like this, you counsel, instruct, the child will just grow in any way, and later on will be defeated by that child, and you will again regret for having not helped and guided that child. So we have a population that is growing. Today we have 45.9 million people, an increase in 10 years of 11 million. But how are we shaping the society? How are we shaping the population? So we need to shape the population, guide it in the way we want. In other countries, like for example, in garbage management, you find that everywhere you go in a public space, you find 3 colors of buckets or waste management bins. You find maybe one is green, one is red, and one is blue. And each of them, maybe one is for biodegradable substances, the other is for maybe solid waste, and so forth. If we could also implement this right from our homes, in public areas. I remember there's a time even in the streets here, we had these waste management bins in the streets, and there was an enforcement. Even crossing a green area would be hard for you to do it because you know there is actually enforcement. So that's what I would like to conclude with.
Thank you, Jimmy. Lastly, the Honorable Minister.
Mine is, there is no other capital city for us, it's Kampala. And Kampala must be made livable. And all of us have a stake. And certainly, of course, engineer and his team will provide the leadership in ensuring that the policies we present work. So we must do whatever it takes. While the other developer is saying Kampala is terminally ill, I think we must deliberately find a way of making it recover. That is really what we must do. Finally, it is a lesson. What has happened in Kiteezi, like we have said, should provide some lesson to the rest of the planners, first in the city and the other cities around us, the 11 cities and municipalities. Everything must be done to avoid a repeat of that. We are being insulted, to be honest. People are saying, yes, in some parts of the world, people are dying of landslides from mountains, natural. But for us here, it is a man-made mountain, garbage that has killed people. It is an insult, a very painful one, but something to learn a lesson from and lessons from. I am happy that the UBC, you have dedicated this day to just discuss that. And we're happy to continue sharing the population, particularly when we come up with the new policies or we want now to see how to operationalize these policies. We'll come here to do a few of discussions on them, but we must also run it to the other cities. I think the next time I want to request UBC, bring us some of these chairpersons of Olga, the Uganda local government teams. We would love them to be part of this discussion so that they can tell us why some cities, the young cities, are doing better than others. Because there are certainly some that are already doing very well, but there are some which are lagging behind in all ways. So they need to hear from their colleagues. Otherwise, we really regret what has happened in Kiteezi as a government. We commiserate with those who have lost their dear ones and quick recovery to those who are grieving in pain in the different hospitals. And we encourage those who are continuing to do rescue operation, if they can rescue some people still alive or in whatever state, we must do whatever it takes to make sure that that is done. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me read some feedback here. Godfrey Mugamba from Bugari district says, thank you, Timothy and Professor. The problem is not the people around Kiteezi, the problem is the planners who make good policies and fail to implement them, enforcers and embezzling of funds, okay? Thank you, Timothy, for the show. The chairperson of the physical planning says Karamoja is dark, Moroto, Kotido, Nakapiripit, Abim, Kabong, Amdat, etc. are all lit, but with inadequate lighting like any other part of the country. Okay, thank you very much, Charles.
They are saying there's power there now. I agree, I concur with that one.
Engineer Yimbazi should be fair to Ugandans and not play the blame game. Those buildings near the disaster area do not get their building permits approved. They do get their building permits approved by KCCA he represents, so who is to blame? The only one who is seeking shelter is the expert at KCCA. Disregard the risk warning and issues building permits in disaster areas and wetlands. This is Frank in Kampala there, okay. Opio Peter says, I am watching from Western Uganda. I want to first thank the Honorable Minister Chweru and the panelists for what they have said in the studio. I have lost hope in the insisting of government because people who are supposed to do the right thing are kicked out because of corrupt heads of state controlling every department of the government. Uganda is rich. The country can even turn west into something else if there is no corruption. Lastly but not least, hello Timothy, thank you for the show. It is sad that we are reaping what we sowed, neglecting the technocrats and their role in development. For instance, if we must build in the swamps, then we should allow the technical people and the people to be able to tell us. Think about the street lighting being in dark areas. This is James in Budo. Finally, I would like to know simply if Kiteezi garbage store was established in '96. Being an empty space by then, why didn't you, as an authority, fence it off as planned area before people encroached it? I actually saw the pictures, and the development came after the place had been gazetted into a dump site, which later on was upgraded into a landfill there. I want to thank the ladies and gentlemen that have been here with us. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate. I also want to thank the production team that has made today possible, the guys behind the cameras, but also the people in the control room. We'll end with this quote. If the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. Good morning.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
In 2007, a team from Prelna came and they started teaching us how to farm. They began by teaching us about food security, where they educated us to grow cassava and also agribusiness.
This kind of farming, the project also taught us how to sell as a group after finding a market. The support from the project has been so good to us. Government Citizen Interaction Center, or GCIC, a unit under State House, is the key contact center between the Ugandan government and its citizens. It helps enhance the monitoring of service delivery by providing a channel for feedback and suggestions from citizens. With this mandate,